Hey everybody, welcome back to Brain Sprain. This episode I want to be starting a series of episodes actually on my Groupme projects on my GitHub. I've been working on these for who knows how long, and I'd like to share a lot of the progress I've made here. The first thing I wanted to show you was the files I have on my GitHub, and hopefully just give you a walkthrough of what they do. I want to make this as simple as possible, so if you're not super familiar with Python, I want to show you my logic and just mindset as I went and created these. So I'll do a chronological uh, step through of the functions I made and what they do, so you can see how they build up into more complex functions. And I'm hoping that it makes more sense as I go along the way. So the first thing I wanted to do was just walk through the introduction here and why I did it. I've been using Groupme since 2014. If you don't know what Groupme is, it's now a Microsoft-owned group messaging application, and it's free on uh, any any app store. So Apple, Android, whatever. If Windows phones still exist, it's available on there, I'm sure. Uh, but it allows you to run a group message just like you would on any phone, like an MMS service. But this is just hosted on an application instead. And I feel it's much easier to use and much more versatile. So, like I said, I've been using it since 2014 and I'm in over 135 groups. So that shows you how much I've used it. Some of these groups have 75,000 messages in it and growing, and some have under 100. So whether, like, obviously those groups weren't used very much, but they did have a purpose. Some have over 100 members and some have under 10. And then some have 3,000 or more images in them and some have none. So obviously it's very versatile and it has, like, there's a lot of data in them. So I've always wanted a way to collect that data, but didn't know how for the longest time. I thought maybe I could run some type of script, or I don't know, just jerry rig some way to scroll through all the messages and take screenshots of them or something like that. And that would be a way I could back it up. But I was never actually sure. And I wanted to back them up because, like, my friends and family are in a lot of these, and I've wanted a way to just back up those memories in case Groupme did burn to the ground at some point. But eventually, after I got into Python for a little while, I found a package called Groupie, and that's what I use in here, and it is incredibly helpful. It's been awesome. So I found a way to back them up, but after I did that, I was like, I could run a lot of analysis on this. And that's what I ended up doing. I found a lot of ways to not only back up the messages, but find connections in between different groups or different people within groups. And that's what I want to show you today, is the very beginning of how that all, that foundation was built. So the way I set it up was actually really simple in my eyes, a lot easier than a lot of other Python packages I've used. The first place you need to go is find the Groupie API. The package is freely downloadable, and you can go to this URL to find it. Another good API, or at least documentation to show you how to use Groupie, is located here. They're technically the same API, but they explain the package in a different way. And then you're going to need your Groupme token, which can be found at this developer website. It's just a really long string of characters that uniquely identifies you as a person, so that way you can log into any of your groups and run analysis on it through their API, basically. And then you're going to need to create a creds.py file, and this is where you're going to paste your token. As an example, I put it here. Your token is just a really long string of characters, like I said, and you're going to need these other variables eventually. Today, we're only going to use the ref group variable, which is just the name of any of your groups that contain a lot of your often used members or other group mates, I guess is how you would say that. And great, so yeah, that's set up. The only file we're going to look at today is Groupme Finders. And I say that because On top of handling keywords and phrases that you want to search for, it also contains the two most important functions, which are find group, and you give it a group name, and then find member, and you give it a group object and a member name, because these are used in just about every other function. They're super, super important. Yeah, so we're going to jump into Groupme Finders. I'm going to explain some of what happens in here. Right now I have all of these functions minimized so you're not quite overwhelmed with them. We're going to look at one function first. We import a bunch of these packages. We import system because we need it to run certain functions. We need the client to start our session with Groupme, and then we use datetime to convert date, what would you call them, integers or floats. And then from the creds file, we import our tokens so we can start our session. We import the skip group list, which we're not going to use yet. And then we import the ref group, like I mentioned before. The first thing we do after importing the packages is we actually start our client. So we take the token, and using the client package or module from the Groupie client, we start our session. We assign that to a variable. After that, we can take our groups, this user get me variable. I'll explain in a little bit. Chats, which is individual direct messages, so only between you and another person. And then we take our groups list that we created before and assign it to an actual list object, because this is only a kind of like a pseudo list. It's not really a list in the Groupie eyes. And then to explain more about what's contained in each of these objects, I made a get attributes function, which is just going to print out everything about these different objects: the group, the member, the message, and your actual object. And that'll hopefully give you a better idea of what you can reference from each object, what attributes they have, and hopefully that'll make more sense of what you can use from each of those. And I already ran it, but I had to take out a lot of the personal data in it, so that way I don't give away any of my friends' data or my data. So in here, we're going to have a lot of redacted information, just so it's, yeah, like I said, we don't want any PII being leaked, personally identifiable information. This is what that stands for. If you have any familiarity at all with Python, you probably know what a dictionary is. It's a key value pair. So a key is a unique value that you can reference in the dictionary. The value is what's associated with that key. So you would find this a lot in a student, for example. A student has most often a uniquely identifiable number. So if you go to college or if you went to K through 12, you probably had a unique ID. And that was either pretty short or it was pretty long, but no other student had that unique ID. So that was your key. The value could be a bunch of other stuff. It could be a list of different information about you, like your name, your address, your email, for example, which could also be your key, because nobody else has the same email as you. But in this case, it could just be an attribute of your dictionary. So something like that would be an example of a key value pair. And then there could be multiple keys in a dictionary, each having their own specific value. So multiple student IDs, for example, would be different keys in a dictionary, and then each of those keys has value, like I explained before. So for example, in groups, these group attributes, the value on the left would be the key, the value on the right would be the value. So ID on its own is a key here because no other entry here has the name ID. And then the value in this particular case is a string, and I had to redact it, so but you can get that it's a string. It's just a bunch of characters to uniquely identify this group. Group ID, again, is a redacted value, but it's a string. This is referencing what this group's in particular ID is. The name, I didn't have to redact it because not it's not PII. This particular group's name is the graveyard. So again, name is a key because no other value on the left has that, or is that. The value on the right is the value for this particular key. It's a string called that graveyard, or the graveyard. Phone number, obviously PII, but its phone number is key, value is the phone number of this particular group's owner. And then the list goes on. So we have type, description, on and on and on. Interesting things to note about this is the members key. I went inside my code and said, don't list all of the members yet because these are actually good to list out attributes for. So I said, look below for member attributes, and we're going to get into that down here. Messages, it gives you some good information. So the member or messages here is the key. The value is actually a whole nother dictionary. So you can have a dictionary within a dictionary. It's kind of like a dictionary inception. But so to explain that, this dictionary has another key called count and then another value. So this goes on and on and on, where you have key last message ID, and then I redacted it, but the value is the ID for the last message sent. So interesting thing to note here is the count, which is 81,000 messages. So this group in particular has sent over 81,000 messages, which is a lot. Yeah, and then moving on, we have member attributes, like I mentioned before. Members here. This key has a value of a list of dictionary items. So kind of like here, we have a dictionary, but members has a list of dictionaries. So we have, for as many members as there are in the group message, we have a dictionary per member in that members list. And I only listed the first one. So the user ID key for the first member has a redacted value, but it would be the ID for that member. The nickname for this person happens to be Joe, and more redacted information. But interesting thing here is the roles. So this person happens to be an admin and an owner of this group. So we can look back up here. This group in particular is called the graveyard, and we know that Joe is the owner of the graveyard, meaning he created this group and invited everybody into it. So now we've covered group attributes, we've covered member attributes. We can reference these objects as their values if we want to use it inside a function. Message attributes. We can reference these keys inside of a message to get their information. We have attributes such as attachments, avatar URL, created at. This is a timestamp for whenever this message was sent, and we're going to use datetime to convert that to a value we can actually read. Favorited by. This is a list of any members that liked the message. They're stored as user IDs, so numbers instead of names, because again, user ID is a unique value that we know won't overlap with any other user IDs. The person who sent, this is the latest message that was sent, by the way. The person who sent it was actually me. I sent that message. It wasn't favorited by anybody because it was a pretty simple message with the text, hey, this is one of the members of the group's names. Let us know when you want to chat. Basically, Discord is an app. I'm free most of today and tomorrow. And then it listed my user ID here, which I redacted. Now, my user attributes. This is me. This is information about my token. This is when my account was created, my email address that I took out. I don't have Facebook connected, and so on all the way down the list. It shows different attributes about my user. So with all of that in mind, I want to step into this Groupme Finders function, or I'm sorry, Groupme Finders file, and into the functions that it created in it. First of all, get attributes. This is what we just looked at. This is everything I went through to find all of that information. First thing I did was I said, all right, I'm going to create a variable called group, and I'm going to take the first entry in the group list, which is the most recent group message that had a message sent in it. I created the group list up here when I said make a list of every group I have, and that created them in reverse chronological order. So the first entry in the list was the most recent group message that was used, which was the graveyard, as I mentioned before. And then I said print a line saying group attributes, and then I referenced the dictionary of the data within the first group. I covered before, group.data is a dictionary that we had to iterate through, and then items is a way to iterate through it with different key values. And then I mentioned that I wanted to skip the members portion of it because I wanted to cover that later. So I said if the key, which is the unique value in that dictionary, is equal to members, print that we're going to skip that list for now and then continue on printing every key and value within that group.data dictionary. After we're done with that, I went on to the member attributes. Now again, I went through this list. I'm only going through the keys because I need to find where the key is equal to members. Once I found it, I made a list of the data within the key attribute, I guess this is the actual key, the members key. And this is the value portion of that key in the dictionary. So where the members key is, I made a list of those values. Now, for the key value pair inside that list, I'm going to print what each of those are. Once I'm done printing that first index, I'm going to break because I only want to print the first one. And that's where you saw Joe. That's where you saw what all of his attributes were. Now, moving on to message. This is how I was able to access the list of messages. I'm taking the first message, which is the most recent message, taking that dictionary because it does have a dictionary of keys and values, and then I'm creating that as a iterable set of values, key value pairs. I'm printing each of those. Since it's only the first message, is only going to go through it once. It's not going to go through every message and print the key value pairs for each one because they would all be the same except for the text. The values would change, but all of the keys would be the same. And lastly, my user's attributes. I declared my user at the top, and I'm going to iterate through those key value pairs. And that's only going to happen once because my user occurs once. I hope that made sense. You'll see that all of these, this was all very repetitive. Like I'm printing the key value pairs because I need you to see what is in each of these objects. It's just that the objects that change. All right. Now that we have that out of the way, I think I'm going to minimize this and take you through find group. Find group is used, like I said in the beginning of the video, in nearly every function because we have to access a group in order to print or manipulate or analyze any of its data. So every time I use find group, I have to provide a group name. Now, this obviously changes. In our case before, this could be the graveyard because I'm a member of that group and I'm allowed to access whatever's in it. Examples I gave on my README were soccer group or family group or friend group. Whatever the name of that group is, you're going to try to access it using this function. So it's going to print right away saying looking for, and then whichever group you provided. We'll call this the graveyard. And it's going to iterate through the group list that we made before. So the list of every group that you're a member of. So it's going to say for group in that list, if the group name in lowercase is equal to the group name that we provided in lowercase, then say found group and give the group name and then return that group object. Now I say lower here because if you provided a string that was uppercase or lowercase or something was off in the group name string, I don't want it to fail just because you were case insensitive, I guess would be the word there. So we're going to change both strings to all lowercase to get rid of any problems there. So assuming we found one, we're going to return that whole group object, which we can then use inside any of the other functions that we call it in. But if you get through this whole for loop without finding the right group name, then we're going to assume you didn't find it. And we're going to say couldn't find group and then the representation of that group name. This is easier, this whole method right here is easier to diagnose the problem because it's going to show you what it was searching for just on a technical standpoint. So it's going to print that out and then return none. This is most likely going to throw an error in your code at some point, and you're going to realize, hey, we found something wrong. So it's going to close. There might be a better way to handle this. I'm not quite sure, but that's how it handles it for now. And then the second most important function is find member. If you ever wanted to find a member within the group you're working in, you would use this because you can't just say, I want to use Joe, for example. You have to get the member's object in order to use Joe in that group. So this one takes a group object, which you would have by running find group, and it also takes a member name, so we could provide Joe there. It's going to list, or it's going to iterate through a list of the members within the current group that you provided, and it's going to try to line up the member name that you provided with any name, nickname, or user ID within that group. These backslashes here are just an easier way for me to read the if-or statements I'm putting here. They don't actually mean anything. You could have this all in one line and it would work the same way. So if we find Joe, I think in the last attributes thing, this was his, yep, it was his nickname. So eventually we're going to find a member's nickname that is equal to Joe. And it's going to say found member name, and we're going to return Joe's actual name, and then we're going to return the member object. If it gets through the whole list and doesn't find the member name, it's going to print the actual representation of that and then return none. And again, that's most likely going to fail at some point. It could error out, or if I had the try-catch blocks in there to handle it, then it'll be fine. I did have a couple of those that worked with it. All right, so yeah, those are the two most important functions in the whole package, I think. So those are used, like I said, nearly every time, and are really just the foundation of how this project works. I think I want to cover one more method in this video,